Hello there, and welcome to Thank the Maker, a podcast about heroes, princesses, scoundrels, hokey religions, ancient weapons, and all things Star Wars. I'm Adam Russell.
Hello, I'm Nick Ganbarian.
And it's Mike Forrester. We are back as a tripod. Nick,
Hey.
you look a little European.
From foggy London town.
Is my jet lag showing? Is my insane jet lag showing?
You look a little bit jet and a little bit lag.
No.
But overall, really crispy and nice.
Really handsome. Just a really handsome guy.
So it did me well. Yeah, I'm right now. I was explaining it to you earlier, but I'll explain it for all the folks listening. I usually, while I was in the UK, I went to sleep at like 3 or 4 a.m. every night. And right now it is 7:15-ish p.m. in California, which equates to exactly when I'd be going to bed. So I'm just feeling a little nuts. You know, it's not really like a tired thing. Yeah. It's not really like, I'm tired. I just feel nuts. Like I need to go to an insane asylum. I feel crazy.
Right.
Pad the walls.
But yeah.
Well, Japan should be really fun then. I'm excited to do this. This is going to be great.
You know, I'm a little, not that I'm nervous about it. I don't know. I just don't want to. I want to maximize Japan time. I don't want to worry about being tired, you know?
Sure. We can figure that out. We missed you dearly. Did you get a chance to listen to the 5 years of Thank the Maker episode?
Not yet. No, but I will. I scrubbed through to make sure that my thing looked okay. I didn't realize that it was mirrored. It was very strange. I didn't realize that like I was recording it that way, I guess. But yeah.
Mysteries of technology.
Yeah. That's it was the front facing iPhone. Does it do that normally, or do I have it like set weird?
There's a setting in there that I think they added after, a few years of Instagram being huge. People started wanting that, and it's in there somewhere.
I should switch that.
It's
Some
probably
people love that, and they just don't like the way their face looks normal.
Yeah.
Because of Instagram.
I have to imagine it's for when people hold stuff up, they want you to be able to read it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which I imagine that's why they did that. But it was a really fun episode. The patrons were involved. Everyone was chatting it up. It was great. It was great to have Ryan Key on. I don't know. I think now that we have you here, we know that you called in and did that. But like when you think about it this podcast has added some friends, added some other people, has become a whole community. Outside of all of our special side projects.
Beautiful.
What does it mean? We're going to Japan in less than 2 months now, which is crazy together, which is going to be so fun. But what is it, when you're reflecting on it as you're overseas, what are you thinking about?
It's a beautiful thing, like I said. And, I feel like gratitude because it's very, Ryan and Adam started it, and I got included pretty early on, and you just don't have any necessary like intention. Like you want it to do well, but a podcast doing well has to do with community, and we got to build that, it's not necessarily about, like not every podcast gets to do that. A lot of people just want to sit around and talk and maybe have an audience, but like, not only do we have an audience, but we have people who are our friends, people who've made friends because of Comic-Con and Mosh Isley and stuff. We have like a physical space that exists. So it's just a beautiful thing that we get to do. And I think in like times like this, where there's not a lot of Star Wars going on, it's extra important for this to exist and for Mosh Isley to exist because there's nowhere for people to go, like there's no movie theaters, there's nothing on Disney Plus right now. So we put in 5 years of work to like build this thing out that like Mosh Isley, like the listeners in the community kind of dictate a little bit like what we are. And good thing that they like us, it's definitely that's just an added bonus,
The community part really is the best and most and least anticipated result of the whole thing, because I remember Ryan and I early on were thinking, okay, this will just be fun to talk about Star Wars and do it in a way where we can kind of just share our feelings about it with the world and get to talk about this kind of stuff in a capacity that we never had before. And then we start thinking, what wouldn't it be amazing if we got to interview this person or this person? And what if that led to this person and this person? Because, Ryan Phillips and I from Story of the Year did a documentary years ago, and we saw how getting one interview leads to another, and it increases your leverage. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're interviewing somebody huge, right? But I never, Patreon at the beginning was kind of like a necessary thing to me. Like, if we're going to pull this off, we need to get some kind of support, some subscriptions to help, like, kind of grease the wheels and make it happen. And then the community aspect and meeting other folks who think the same way, and then Marsh Isley, and then, meeting people through the, 501st stuff and Mike, and all of it was completely off our radar at the very beginning. So I agree. In the end,
it's like unintended not consequences, but it's just
positive
butterfly effect. Yeah. Like whatever
benefit.
You want to call it.
Unexpected benefit.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have an amazing and highly anticipated, for us at least, interview today with Steve Sansweet. You guys might know him as if you're really into Star Wars, you're at least vaguely familiar with him and his massive Star Wars collection. If you've been to Star Wars Celebration, you may have seen some of it there. So we're excited to get in and talk to him about that whole history and some other things he's working on, and one thing specifically that he's working on with us in some capacity. So let's get on to that right now. Our guest today is Steve Sansweet, executive chairman and founder of Rancho Obi-Wan, that many of you might know is the world's largest private collection of Star Wars memorabilia. Steve, welcome.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you here. So we got in contact with you specifically because we've been working on this LA Strikes Back initiative to kind of raise some funds for folks in LA in support of the LA fires. And you and your folks agreed to give away 4 tickets for a private tour of Rancho Obi-Wan.
Right.
And we wanted to have you here just to talk a bit about what, this amazing thing you've done over the course of your life and what you've got coming up, and touch base with you on some things. So,
well, the cause is very dear to me too. I spent many years in Los Angeles. I was bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal in LA for 9 years before I moved up to Northern California to join Lucasfilm in 1998. So I've got tons of friends in Los Angeles, at least one couple who lost their house in Pacific Palisades. And many others who were evacuated. I used to be known as the bureau chief who could best handle crises, because we had floods and fires and riots and mudslides and earthquakes. So it was a very challenging bureau to run, but lots of good people.
All the best and the worst in Southern California, all that great weather and being at the center of everything comes at a price.
Yes, it does.
That's true.
It's not chasing me away. I know that much.
No, me either. I'm actively trying to move there. So, you mentioned you kind of pre-answered a question I was going to ask. When you moved to Los Angeles to work for the Wall Street Journal there, you had already started amassing this collection that you started before Star Wars even hit theaters in 1976. You were already starting to collect. How did you get in contact with Lucasfilm? How did that relationship start? And how did you end up, officially kind of starting this museum in the, a 10,000 square foot converted chicken barn in Sonoma County? Which came first, Lucasfilm or the property that you moved to with the collection there?
The chicken or the egg?
Exactly.
Lucasfilm came literally the egg and the chickens, since this is a former chicken ranch. It housed 20,000 hens up until the early 1970s, according to the neighbors. I first contacted Lucasfilm in 1987 to do a 10th anniversary piece for the op-edit page of the Wall Street Journal. And I talked to Lynn Hale, who was the longtime head of publicity, who just retired a couple of years ago. And I said, I'd be happy to come up and interview George in person. She said, that won't be necessary. We'll do it by phone. I said, oh, it's no problem at all. I definitely wanted to visit Skywalker Ranch. Eventually got to work there, but so we did the interview on the phone. And in 1990, I started hearing rumors that Lucasfilm had restarted its publications division, its book division, and they were interested in getting somebody to do a price guide of Star Wars collectibles. And I cold called. I asked Lynn who to call, and she told me the head of publishing, the new head of publishing, was starting it up. And I called and said, if anybody does a collectibles book, it should be me. And she said, and you are who? I have a pretty big collection.
Sure.
She said, well, what I really want is a price guide with anecdotes. And I said, I don't think that'll work. And that resulted in my first Star Wars book, From Concept to Screen to Collectible. So that came out in 1991 and was the first book, apart from price guides, unofficial price guides, that had talked about Star Wars collecting and that traced Star Wars from an idea in George's head to how ILM worked to put it together to how it became so popular because of the stuff that was out there. And I was helping them all along collecting the stuff.
Amazing.
It's pretty amazing that you kind of just inserted yourself into the situation. Of course, being a journalist and being in that world, you had an in, but I feel like you kind of wrote your own destiny in a way. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to create this collection, and it's going to be undeniable at some point. And here you are all these years later.
Well, as the famed mythologist Joseph Campbell said, an anthropologist and so many other things, follow your bliss. And I have that magnet up in the living room of my house, which has very little Star Wars stuff, if any, actually. I'm trying to
You need a break once in a while, right?
because there's so much of it right across the way in the barns, and which has become Rancho Obi-Wan and the museum.
Well, I've been following you for a long time. 20 years ago or so, when my band first started doing pretty well and we were making great money for a few years, I just could not stop buying Star Wars stuff. And this was leading up to Revenge of the Sith, right between episode 2 and 3. So there was stuff everywhere. I spent way too much money, and I had this delusion that I even said this in an interview with Lucasfilm for StarWars.com, actually, because, again, the band was doing well, so I got that opportunity. And I'm quoted on StarWars.com saying, I want to be the next Steve Sansweet, which was insanely delusional. And since that, I reached a point where I was like, this is impossible. I'm never going to make enough money to make this happen. There's no focus to my collection. So I've since sold it off and kind of refocused my goals. But you took out a second mortgage on your house to build more. You went all in. You did the opposite. So, congratulations on staying married. Congratulations on not bankrupting yourself. How do you feel at this point after all these years? Obviously this is working out great. We're going to talk about the Saga Museum shortly. It's probably pretty challenging moment where you said, okay, I can either do this or not do this. You have the two options in your hand. You have the red and blue pill. Want to talk a little bit about that?
I was very lucky because I was an adult and working at a pretty good place and getting a decent salary, not an exorbitant salary, but a decent salary as a journalist. And I got an invitation to the advanced screening of Star Wars on the back lot of 20th Century Fox 10 days before it opened and all the hype started. And I had started collecting space toys before Star Wars came out. And so I had this collection of Japanese battery operated robots and wind up robots, tin toys, wonderful stuff. And I would go to a toy show in Glendale, California, and it was twice a year. And every time I saw a robot that I really liked, an older robot, I couldn't afford it. It was always some ad guy or doctor or dentist or lawyer who had the money to buy these wonderful toys. And I thought, if I only had a time machine. And then Star Wars came out, and I realized that I did have a time machine, but it was then in 1977
Right.
And that's where I was. And so I started buying Star Wars stuff as a complement to the space toy collection from the shelves, from a wonderful independent toy shop called Mena Toys in the Silver Lake area, from Toys R Us. Of course, every time I would get a whole bunch of Star Wars toys together and go to the checkout, cashier would undoubtedly say, "Oh, you're really spoiling your little boy, aren't you?" Yeah,
Absolutely. He can't get enough of this stuff.
yeah. Oh, it's his birthday.
Right. Also, he really likes the cards, the card backs to be perfect. So make
have to be
sure.
met.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Steve, I have a ton of your books on my shelf, and I'm, as a contributor to the museum myself, I think for people who have followed along, probably in the 2021, I contributed a Death Trooper Black Series action figure with the original illustration that went on the actual packaging from artist Greg Titus. And we've seen you on Pawn Stars and all of these, high-end collectibles shows where they want to show off the Boba Fett with the firing rocket and all those things that fetch big money. Are there a particular few toys though, or collectibles, whatever it is, that might not be the most valuable on paper, but are really special to you? I'd be interested in hearing your comment on that. You have so many things, but like what makes something special to you?
Yeah, we've got 400 to 500,000 items in the collection here at Rancho Obi-Wan and in our downtown warehouse.
Yeah.
So it's hard to pick one or two.
Sure.
I guess the most precious object to me predates the release of the movie. So it was a hand-painted banner with an early version of a Star Wars logo on it that was painted by Joe Johnson.
Yeah.
Who was the art director of ILM.
Yep.
And went on to become a famous director. And Joe painted it at the behest of Charlie Lippincott, who was the first advertising, marketing, merchandise. I mean, Charlie had 3 lines on his business card because he did so much at Lucasfilm in the early days. And Charlie thought, we got to get the fans interested in this movie. So a year in advance, he did a couple of conventions. And one of the first ones, one of the biggest ones, was San Diego Comic-Con, which was then only 6 years old. And he asked Joe to paint this banner that they had on their sales table. They had a poster for sale for $1.75 done by Howard Chaykin, who illustrated the first Star Wars comic books.
Right.
And in the center of the poster is a cutout from a cast and crew T-shirt of Ralph McQuarrie art with the Star Killer, the early version of Luke Skywalker.
Nice.
Yep.
So that, I guess, is the most resonant of my collectibles, and that's the thing I always go to and say that would be the first thing I'd save enough.
Is there anything that excites you that's new? I mean, that you think that I have to have that, not only in a sense of you collecting it, but like for their museum, but personally for you, that you would just be excited to get?
There's a licensee called Regal Robot that in the last bunch of years has done exact 3D scanned replicas of the maquettes that were done, especially for Return of the Jedi. They just did a Jar Jar from Episode 1.
Yeah.
But these are life-size to the maquettes that George looked at and said, no, I'd like the eyes on that on this one and the nose on that one there, and let's mix it up. So you see the evolution of the characters that way, and they've done such a great job. They're all made in the U.S. They're hand-painted. They're now coming with, at least a lot of them, with the ability to get a sketch and a signed plaque from the original ILM person who made that maquette.
Yeah,
that's great.
So these are really exciting pieces, and I love them for themselves. And I've just transferred the whole lot of them to a much better display case so people can enjoy them. It's all about sharing. I mean, that's the key. If I had all this stuff and they were all in boxes or packed away at a warehouse like they were in Los Angeles, where I added 2 stories to my house on stilts in the west of the Hollywood Hills, east of the Hollywood Hills, rather. What good would it be? But
Yeah.
Sure.
seeing the look on people's faces when the main door of the museum is open and then there's another reveal later on, that really, it still tickles me.
Is
Yeah,
is there
that's the thing.
is there
Yeah.
something, Steve, to the thing that we look back with, especially someone like you who has been collecting and been a part of this franchise for so long? When we mentioned Tom Spina and the crew over at Regal Robot, and you had these maquettes of, from Phil Tippett and all of these amazing artists that were so nuanced into the point where we don't want just the Cantina aliens, we want the concept art. I don't know many other franchises that go this hard into every single piece of its DNA that people want to collect it and be a part of it. Is there something special to Star Wars in both form language from the artists? What do you think sets Star Wars apart from nearly every other pop culture franchise, especially after 50 years of this amazing story that George built?
I think it was the right movie at the right time with the right people. It
Sure.
was one of those things where lightning in a box goes off.
Sure.
They recruited the right people for ILM, originally in North Hollywood, and brought most of them up to Northern California when George moved Lucasfilm's headquarters. And they shared this vision, and they worked so hard. I mean, after a year, ILM basically had one camera built, the Dykstraflex,
Yeah.
and one shot completed, and George thought he was going to lose the whole thing. But it was just this amazing confluence, and the film was just on everybody's tongue, and people grew up with it. So in the 90s, these kids who went to the theater and bought Star Wars action figures or had them bought for them by their folks were of an age where they could go out and replace some of the stuff, because the pop culture was becoming very retro, and people started collecting things. There was enough money around. People were making enough money at the time. And this whole industry grew up around pop culture, and Star Wars was the keystone.
It is.
It's the story, it's the special effects, it's the creatures.
Sure.
I mean, just the imagination behind Star Wars.
Right.
So your collection isn't just toys. A lot of it is toys, right? Because there are so many, and talking about right place, right time, and setting kind of new standards for things. The way George handled merchandising at the beginning was unprecedented to that point. So you have, I'm sure some huge percentage of your collection is toys, but you have so much else. I'm assuming you have, 501st certified replicas. You probably have, production crew gifts. Like I've got this ILM hoodie here, things like that. What is it a fine line between something that has to be in the collection and something that you feel like kind of belongs there? Where do you draw that line?
I draw the line, number one, what I can afford. Now, in way back when I took a second mortgage out on my house in Los Angeles to buy a bunch of ILM made models, not used in the production, but from Gary Kurtz's collection.
Oh, wow.
And I was intrigued. I went over to where they were. I looked around. I said, let me think about it overnight. And I got back to the guy who was selling it for Gary. And he said, did you pick a piece that you want? And I said, I want all of them. So there was a time when I figured that was the major thing that I said, okay, this is going to be a collection. At the time, I had hundreds of other toys, the Japanese toys, the Major Matt Mason, Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, space toys of every kind. And I started selling those off and just adding to the Star Wars collection. In the late 80s, when there was almost no new Star Wars merchandise, I bought big pieces of three major collections. There was a guy named Walt Steuben in Pennsylvania who had such a big collection, much bigger than mine at the time, that Hasbro used him. Would that be No, Kennery used him.
Sure.
Uh, put together a display for Toy Fair International, the wholesale retail show in New York City. So I spent my money when nobody else had anything to buy, wrote that first book, turned other people on to collecting, and it just sort of got crazy.
Yeah, I can only imagine, like the relatively tiny collection that I had that got kind of out of hand. I remember thinking, where do you put the arbitrary lines between what is worth spending money on and what isn't? And I'm a very obsessive compulsive person. I think we're all that to some degree. It's the ADHD artist kind of brain thing. But you have to, you want to be a completist, but you have to kind of decide what you can pull off and what you can't. And I know even when you are such a completist and you achieve some of those goals, there are still things that you may never find. And I remember reading interviews 20 years ago about, you wouldn't say what the things are that are still on the list, the kind of wish list, because you don't, want the price to go crazy. How much progress have you made on that short list of like the very old and very rare at this point?
I have no holy grail now.
Wow, that's awesome.
I buy what I like, the things that appeal to me, the quirky things, the very unusual pieces, the one-of-a-kind pieces. But I don't have the income that I had when I was working full-time. A museum job does not pay very much. I leased my collection for $0 a year to Rancho Obi-Wan. But I buy what's fun and what interests me. I still buy the action figures. I buy the Regal robot pieces. I look for unusual posters. I probably have, counting all sizes, I probably have close to 4,000 to 5,000 posters in the collection. So the theatrical posters, commercial posters, fan posters.
Yeah.
There's just a lot out there. And in the last couple of years, I've realized that rock bands love Star Wars too. Rock bands composed of artists of a certain age love Star Wars, and they use Star Wars stuff on their posters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been trying to collect Star Wars music posters.
Oh, cool.
Which is difficult because most people who sell posters are in it because they collect all kinds of music posters, and they rarely put Star Wars in the title on eBay.
Right.
So it's a matter of going through groups from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and today to find great Star Wars rock posters. So, you never know what's going to turn you on.
Well, you're talking to the right people. we have a thing. It's a sort of a party, sort of a live music event kind of thing called Mosh Isley that we started with a couple other podcasts a few years ago. And Mike, who's a graphic designer, has done all of those designs, and each one is a mashup of something kind of punk or other music related kind of stuff with Star Wars. So
we'll make sure to get you some, Steve.
Yes.
I think we know. Great. Yeah, we know a couple people. We can make it happen. Steve, I think we have definitely talked about the Saga Museum, because for people who want to look at supporting not only Rancho Obi-Wan, but I think really to see when we talk about the fires and we talk about the devastation of what this can mean. This collection, along with the other fellow collectors that you're teaming up with, like, this truly is one of a kind. And some of these pieces will never be reproduced again. Some of them don't even actually exist outside of the original version that you have. Can you give us a, kind of the elevator pitch on what the Saga Museum project is unfolding in front of us, which I'm very excited to support?
So almost 4 years ago, a number of our board of directors members and one outside collector who is now on the board of collectors, we were talking. We realized that none of us had children. We all had spent lots of time and energy building our collections. And we wanted them not to go up to some auction where somebody says, oh, there's a rocket firing bounty hunter, what, Boba something or other.
Uh-huh.
And you know, here, $10.
Right.
Right.
So we decided to look into gathering together these 4 major collections. It's Gus Lopez, who has the best collection of props and costumes and helmets and weapons, actual props and costumes in his collection. Lisa Stevens and her husband Vic Wertz, who have an amazing collection of pre-production art and maquettes and things of that nature for the toys. And Duncan Jenkins, who has an amazing international collection. He's in Kansas City. The other 2 are in the Seattle area. And we announced last October that our intention is to put together something called the Saga Museum of Star Wars Memorabilia. And we are at the point where we're sending out requests for information to 8 major cities in the U.S. on the East and West Coast and 1 in the middle. And we hope that sometime in the next 2 years to maybe do a pop-up show that would be sort of a proof of concept of merging our 4 collections together and have some of the best pieces on display in time for the 50th anniversary of Star Wars.
Wow.
Perfect time.
So when you're saying this, I think for people who are trying to understand exactly, so this is essentially is a merging of the greatest collections in Star Wars. I don't want to say history, but in terms of all Star Wars, the group of you have, without a doubt, the most complete, amazing collections that have been curated and hand selected and picked to maintain as part of the collection, but you're combining them to make it so that fans can experience this journey of all of your hard work over the past couple decades.
Right. And we do guided tours here at Rancho Obi-Wan once a week for up to 12 people. We keep it small. Mm-hmm. And tours last 2 to 3 hours, and our docents are well versed in the stories of how things came about, what this was, where it came from, and the quirky stories behind them. Sure. The other 3 collections are not open to the public, so this would be a chance to see some of the most amazing things ever made for Star Wars. Behind the scenes look at how things were made, both in the marketing of Star Wars and in the licensing of Star Wars.
Sure.
And plenty of things to do, permanent exhibits, revolving exhibits, even traveling shows, traveling exhibits. So we're very excited by the concept. It's a tough environment to raise money.
Yeah.
So we will see. We will see.
Are you approaching this like an art museum where maybe you hope to get a grant from a major city that has a budget for enrichment type things?
Yeah, I mean, you look at a city like San Francisco, which has had so many problems in the downtown area and lots of vacancies and retailers leaving. Well, San Francisco is due for a turnaround, and that's one of the cities we're looking at. We're looking at Los Angeles, Seattle, Dallas, Chicago, New York, and Boston, and Las Vegas. Forgot Las Vegas, which is an up and comer.
Plenty of money there.
We've gone. Yeah, all we have to do is look at some of those movies. The gangs go in and they somehow end up with millions of dollars.
Sure.
I don't think we'll try that angle.
Yeah, call George Clooney. I think he knows how to get into the vault.
Ocean
and then
77.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Steve, personally, again, as a contributor to the museum, I think we want to say thank you, of course, for being dedicated to this cause, because I think from our standpoint of going, sometimes, especially with Star Wars over the past 10 years, has really, we have more licensees than we've ever had before in the past. We have the inline stuff that you can buy, the fact that you can go to Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland and and build your own lightsaber. And we're getting these experiences that I think as a kid in 1977 could only dream of at the time. And now, we're looking at really the golden age of almost everything Star Wars, which is incredible. But from your standpoint, how can people get involved to be able to support the future of this project? Because we want to, of course, say thank you for contributing to LA Strikes Back. But from, moving on in the future of being able to protect and preserve this amazing collection, how can people support Rancho Obi-Wan and also the Saga Museum as it's developing?
Well, you can go online to ranchoobiwan.org and you can become an annual member, for which you get a membership kit and a holiday card, and a discount at the Rancho store, sometimes online. Take part in Rancho auctions. We have a couple of auctions a year online. And you can read about the Saga Museum there. You can make a donation. We have a 5-minute video if you go to the drop-down menu and you hit the Saga Museum, you can see this video with all 4 of the collections and the collectors, and talking about what is so important to them and why Star Wars made such an impression on them, and why they collect, and what their hopes are for the future in merging these collections.
This is so exciting. I'm so excited about this. When I heard this announcement, I just couldn't have been more excited. I've wanted to make it to Rancho Obi-Wan for 20 years, but the Saga
this summer,
Museum,
let's go.
Yeah, maybe
We're still open. We'll be open for many years to come, whether we do the Saga Museum or not. So
sure,
come on up, Adam.
I'll be happy to take you up on that. I think I might have a show in that area at some point this year. Nothing official announced yet, but Nick, you being the one of us that has the most complete toy collection specifically, do you have any specific questions for Steve relevant to that?
I mean,
your
I
girlfriend
kind of
is a maker who works on Star Wars,
I guess I could piggyback something that I kind of already asked a little bit, but like my favorite thing to collect is very specifically toys of Darth Vader in like the 10 or 15 minute section of Revenge of the Sith where he's still Anakin Skywalker, like pre-suit Vader. That's kind of my little niche where, I only have a couple of pieces, but I love that. Is there anything that's
collector?
Yeah. Is there anything like really niche that you could think of that that's kind of hard to find, or something that I don't know why it's my favorite thing? Like, is there anything where you kind of don't know why you love something, but you always want to collect?
Jar Jar Binks tongue pops.
Yeah.
That's a weird one, and I know a couple people who have them.
We've got a case of them.
Yeah, that's
They all melt. So we had the tongue reproduced in latex.
Oh wow.
Yeah, sure. That's better than the glucose that was in it. Yeah, I can imagine.
On that,
No,
actually,
I don't have any specific area like that, Nick. Ann Newman, who's the president and chief executive of Rancho Obi-Wan, and I fell in love with BB-8. So we have a BB-8 focus collection.
Nice.
But it's a huge focus collection because
Yeah.
there's so much BB-8 stuff. And then, of course, when Baby Yoda came out,
Yes.
sounds much nicer than a Grogu collection. But we've got a shelf unit filled with Grogu stuff. I had to buy a Grogu hot water bottle because I couldn't believe they made a Grogu hot water bottle. So there are things that catch our fancy that we invest in, that we buy for each other for the museum. So Anne is particularly excited with Grogu and Yoda as a whole.
Awesome.
I love that.
We could sit here and talk to you for hours, but I'm becoming very aware of your time here, so we want to wrap up. I'm going to ask you one more question offline, but I want to say thank you again for being here. We're going to include links to the website for Rancho Obi-Wan and the museum in the show notes. we'll link to everything. LA Strikes Back, all of that, and thank you again for contributing to that, because we are again, we're happy to do what small part we can to help recover from this terrible tragedy.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you. Well, that was fun.
I didn't get to bring up the one thing. I mean, we didn't have too much time, but I came across his book called Star Wars Scrapbook, which he put out in 1998. I came across it like I guess 20 years later when I came across it in like at a yard sale, and I bought it. I bought it not knowing that it was Steve Sansweet, and then I got home and I was like, wait a minute, this is like legit. And it's a really cool book. Like, it's very there's like reproductions of like Star Wars fan club like letters and all these things in there. It's like not a pop-up book, but it's kind of interactive, which is awesome. So yeah, that's like my favorite thing that I've seen of his that he's like created as a product for Star Wars.
There's a lot of people who don't know how impactful Steve Sansweet is to a lot of the weird odds and ends of Star Wars, right? So if there's ever been anything about, he was saying the unofficial price guides or collectibles or anything, I literally have 4 or 5 books on my shelf that he has either been the, foretold by Steve Sansweet, or does the, does the intro, or he's actually one of the contributing authors or anything. And if you've ever watched like Pawn Stars or the Sotheby's auction sites or any of those things that do these like featurettes on, we're here with this expensive vinyl Cape Jawa that goes for, upwards of $10,000. It's generally always Steve who is the one who's explaining the history of the show. I think he was also in the Toys That Made Us too. Yeah. And so I think for people who are watching a Star Wars podcast know who Steve is, but I think when you really get to understand how impactful he is in relation to the fans, the dude is a legend. And that was super cool that we got to just talk to him about that.
Absolutely. It's crazy how, like, in a way, people like him are like a kind of, niche celebrity that almost predates reality TV in a way that it's
Sure.
like a niche person who's like, what they're doing in real life is so interesting, and you aspire to be like that person. He's one of those people, and in this community, I feel like anyone who gets to the nerd level where you say, like, in Nick's case, like, I'm going to get all these Black Series or something. He's one of the first, if not the first name to pop up, and getting to meet him at Celebration, like I said in the interview, or maybe I said it beforehand, I approached him and asked him for a selfie. It was late in the day. He looked tired as hell, and he reluctantly probably was like, okay, here we go, yeah. But it was so cool for me, and it's just this guy with a collection,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but he's also, when you understand in a little bit, like when I send him anything, you would think that after he's been collecting for 50 years, that he's like, yeah, oh, you have this? Wow, that's crazy. Oh my gosh. He's still like, ooh, that sounds interesting. Yeah. Like that. Oh yeah. Okay. What's up with that? And I have to imagine from his side of things, like, it's cool to hear that he's still collecting. I think that's awesome. Right. But like, I was trying to tell him, like, Roosevelt's at this point could send 50 shirts to him that are all like, even just the ones that I did that are limited edition, like, once those are gone, those are gone. And so there's something about Star Wars inherently that is collectible. I'm seeing a lot of trading cards come back, but it's like, you look at the original tops with the C-3PO boner and the boner card and all, like all of that stuff. It's like, he's got one of those. And I think from that standpoint, and talking about the fires and talking about the destruction of some of these people, some people, which breaks my heart, is that some people had things that cannot be replaced. When you look at Star Wars from this standpoint of going, even, and this is going to break people's hearts, but like, Lucasfilm was still kind of a broke company even after Star Wars started. Like, they knew that they had this thing, but like, they were not, they were just making movies. It wasn't this like monstrous multi-corp that it is now.
The ILM crew just went back to work. in
100%,
77,
right? Like
78.
and for people who don't know, like they knew that Boba Fett was such a big character that they painted over Boba Fett's Empire Strikes Back outfit. They didn't make a new one. They didn't archive. They literally repainted Boba Fett's Empire for Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like when you
Yeah.
think of someone like Steve, who is like literally doing his part to do a preservation on the Star Wars collections and memorabilia and all of these things, this is something that Lucasfilm hasn't even done.
Yeah.
So like when you think about it from an archival standpoint, the work that Steve and the other collectors who are contributing to the Saga Museum, I think we all owe them a little bit of something, because when you get that nostalgia drop of like, I remember that, and you get those feelings, that's only because however many years ago they decided, don't get rid of it, hold on to it.
Yeah.
And we're kind of all in their debt for that.
Yeah. You think about any other grassroots archival endeavor. I'm trying to think of something else that would be on this level in terms of like the difficulty and complexity of all the different types of things, how to organize it, archive it, store it.
Right.
You know?
Right. And I think
It's
like
a real
comics.
museum.
Yeah,
It's a
I think comics would probably be the most comparable ones. I mean, you have like original Jack Kirby illustrations. You have, people like Pez. For some reason, there's people who are very nuanced about Pez. But you look at some of these things where like comics have been around for so long. There's people who only collect gold, Silver Age, Bronze Age, like blah, blah, blah. But you have the original art, John Romita, all of those kind of iconic artists of that time. There are people still collecting their original art, but certainly I don't think there's any collection out there that's as complete as something as large as this, that all of them are communicating and contributing. This, like he was saying, we want to do a traveling show, which is awesome, because we've seen where Star Wars will do like a traveling costume show or something. But like, imagine that. But what did he say? He has almost a quarter, or there's
the rough total of
it's
all
over 1
four,
million pieces, right?
1.5 million. Yeah.
That's so many pieces.
Like I just got to finally go to the Louvre last year, whatever, when I was in Europe with the yellow card. And I was blown away by the size and the scope of what they have in there. Yes, It was cool to see like the Mona Lisa or certain stuff, but like just the number blew my mind. And I think about this, it's not on that level, but I think about St. Louis Art Museum that Jill and I were just at the other day. I bet there is more in these 4 collections that they're doing with the Saga Museum than we have in the St. Louis Art Museum total.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, just even the fact that he was like, we have probably 2,000 posters. I mean, I can think of posters like me, just my little old self. I've got 30 Star Wars posters in a very specifically curated, stuff like this, right? Like this is stuff that I like to have, blah, blah, blah. But like even this was for my art show. This one right here by this artist that Steve doesn't have. This photo that was a COVID project that our buddy Mike Bender is actually in. Like when I think about stuff like this, it's like, I'm like, what do I do? Like this was in Wired magazine as a, tribute to Star Wars. Like, should I give this to Steve? I could.
Well, it'd be good. Like, I think he kind of mentioned it too. It's like like any other museum, there should be like a rotating, kind of exhibit thing, so you could theme that section out every once in a while.
Art of the Rebellion.
Whatever it is. I mean, you could think of Star Wars as a culture, and like the museum will reflect that. It's not just like, here's all the toys. It's gonna be, you could tell a story, and it reflects society in a lot of ways. And, I think say there's like a whole wing or a small wing or something, that's all food related products, being in something like that would be this super colorful, like kind of, in a weird way, because we are all raised with capitalism, there would be this sense of comfort to be in a room that's just a bunch of Star Wars products. You'd be like, oh wow,
Imagine it being a grocery store, Like
Totally.
you walk
Like
into the
Meow
wing.
Wolf.
Yes, exactly. And it's just
Sure,
lit like
sure.
it's the actual racks and shelves and everything. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Well, I think what will be interesting to see too is like where the Lucas Museum of Narrative Arts goes, because
Yes.
I know George, I know the idea, at least, and how it's been parsed out is, people are going to go in expecting that it's going to be the Star Wars Museum, and it's really not. It's a collection of both George's work, but also things that inspired him that he wants people to be inspired by. So it's kind of like a combination of like his personal connection, his curated collection, obviously his work, the Lucasfilm, all of the other people who contributed to his storytelling. But for stuff like this, the Saga Museum might end up being more of what people are expecting when it comes to a Star Wars museum. Like, I think these guys are this all of this crew, this amazing organization of people who are contributing this. This is going to be one of the coolest things, and I plan on supporting it myself. I'd love to do a fundraiser for it. We'll figure this out once they have a location selected. Yeah, let's do what we can to support this, because I think this is something that's near and dear to all of us.
Absolutely. Just reading, we didn't read off the full, he kind of gave an overview, but the full list that's on their website. The museum will include, this is the plan, 200,000 square foot space, permanent exhibits, rotating exhibits, event facilities, a 300-seat theater, a research center, educational academy, indoor community spaces, meeting and conference rooms, outdoor and rooftop gathering spaces, a general store, cafe, restaurant. So like any other legit museum, that has, all the things aside from just the exhibits, they're really going for it here. And I hope it pans out and they really can do this, because the idea of showing up and seeing it at the level that I think we can all picture in our heads seems like just like the coolest place on earth.
100%. Well, let's do Adam, let's talk a little bit about, as we're closing out here, let's talk about LA Strikes Back. That's kind of our next big thing that we're working on, and Steve and the Rancho Obi-Wan fam so graciously contributed a private tour, essentially, for someone to be able to go and check it out. So what's the latest and greatest on this amazing I think we're at over 50 helmets, custom designed, custom painted. People are working on them. Some of the stuff we've seen behind the scenes is amazing.
Unreal custom one-of-a-kind helmets, a lot themed specifically to the fires,
first responders, and
like a firefighter helmet on top of a stormtrooper kind of thing.
Yeah, it's so cool.
But we're also trying to get some things donated from musicians and things. I'm going to donate one of my basses, a bass that's named Captain Rex, that Mike made some decals for me. We have some photos of us putting that together that I've played on stage for the past couple of years. I actually just dug up, I was talking about my collection before. I'll get these out and show them on camera right now.
Ooh. What about you, Nick? Couple picks?
At least.
You got those Ahsoka picks and some things. I have from Star Wars Celebration 4 in 2007.
McQuarrie stuff.
Yeah, Ralph McQuarrie's concept art action figures. There's the Star Killer, the early Luke Skywalker one with the kind of gas mask thing, the respirator, and the lightsaber with the big glowing kind of base by the hilt. They got these collector coins. And then the R2 and 3PO, kind of the, like, what is it, Metropolis? What is the
Metropolis, Yep.
And then the Celebration card on the back. It's like a double card, and it's awesome. In this, these protective outer cases. So
sweet.
These are really cool. They've been in a box forever. I think there's no better time than now, I think, to just kind of donate these and hand them off.
Yeah.
And I've got a bunch of other stuff, little things. I don't know. We'll see what we put together, and we're trying to get some other folks to contribute stuff. I think Ryan Key said he has somewhere in storage. He's looking tomorrow, I think. It's an Ocean Avenue bus bench sign, on the back, the back of the seat where they do ads. A lot of times in LA, New York, you'll see those. He has an Ocean Avenue one. It's
That's awesome.
I don't know, probably 6 feet wide or something. That's probably going to get auctioned as well. I don't want to list off too many names.
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
Dion for
Yeah.
sure from Amberlin's going to give
Yep.
us something. But trying to hit up folks who are Star Wars fans and musicians. If we end up getting some people who are casual fans but want to donate something, of course, we're going to take that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Emily
Whatever we can do to
Swallow.
raise money.
Emily Swallow's been awesome. She's like totally dropping in to help us out. So we've got, this is a full court effort here from both musicians, both creators, makers, people within Star Wars are contributing to this. So we're super happy and grateful to tap into the community yet again to really make an impact on people who are still, to this day, I know with all the craziness going on, it's very hard. Our American attention span has moved on to say that was tragic back then, but like it is, people are dealing with it every single day still. So we're happy to contribute.
Well, what should we talk about in the after show segment for patrons?
Ooh. If you could have one Star Wars collectible, what would it be?
Let's do that.
Ooh,
Bonus
that's a
segment
good
for
one.
patrons.
That's a good one.
All right, we'll do that in the bonus segment for Patreons. Patreon.com/ThankTheMakerPod to check that out. Everybody, thanks for listening. LAStrikesback.com. May the Force be with you. If you enjoy Thank the Maker, you can support us by following and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Or you can support us directly at patreon.com/ThankTheMakerPod, where you can get access to our Discord server, exclusive content, exclusive merch, our recording live stream, and more. Our patrons quite literally make Thank the Maker possible.